Let's go ahead and jump into the visual here. Everyone should have one of these. So what does it mean to be in the pit? So when we think about that, it means that a student has a set of unresolved, contradictory ideas about something they are trying to understand. If they don't have any ideas, it's not time to be in the pit yet. You have to have some information. If you remember back to the beginning when he talked about the tourist idea, he asked questions and they were like, we don't know. And what did he say? Go do some research and then come back. And now we've got some things to work with. So it's really important that we don't throw them into the pit before they're ready to be in the pit, because what's going to happen? Oh, lots of tears, frustration, maybe a little angry with you, you know, like, no, I need more. So we do want to be careful about that, right? So as we look at this diagram, we've got this side, we've got a girl with a pink shirt, and we have another side, a boy with a yellow shirt. And just do a little comparison. What do you notice about, there's a little bit of difference between the two sides, and then tell me what you notice about the pit. Anything in general that you notice about it. You can just shout it out.
The one with the boys in looks a little smaller and narrower.
Look at the little bubbles for the boy, and the girl doesn't have bubbles. What do you notice?
The girl's side's kind of from the teacher's perspective and the boys' is from the students.
Yeah, so the boys' side is definitely much more of a kid language that you might hear them say or that they would be able to use. And on the other side is a little more academic language. Look at where you enter and where you exit at the height. Why do you think one's lower and one's higher?
Takes longer.
Okay, say that over here.
You gain knowledge.
Yeah, it's kind of a subtle idea, but if I'm going in here and I'm coming out at the same height as a student, it's like, well, I'm in the same place. And he actually talks, when I heard him speak, he talked about that originally it was the same level, and realizing, oh no, this is something I need to change with this, that one side's higher, like I'm making this tremendous effort and now I'm up here and I was there. But this is something that you can definitely use with your student, have it up in your homeschool area, and have them kind of be able to identify where they're at in the pit, and you can even have your kids make their own. Lots of teachers, you know, have made their own pit and have it be reflective of whatever the theme is in their classrooms and type of thing. But this is kind of looking at the different processes and where you're at in getting there. And this is a fluid thing. Like, I loved his comment at the end, like, your job is to pull people out of the pit or pull people back in. Don't let them get away with easy thinking. And I don't know if you noticed, but the cartoonist had, when he was talking about that simple thinking, it was like a bridge going across. Like, you can build a bridge for him and completely surpass the whole entire process, and that is not what we want to do. We want to embrace this when we can. Okay, so if we think about this, he talked about struggle and cognitive wobble. There's another video where he actually talks about helping his kids learn to ride their bikes and the wobble. Like, if you've got a child who is totally able to ride their bike, one who's learning and one on training wheels, who are you going to spend your time with? The one in the middle, right? Like, you're right there, you're encouraging, you're giving tip, move here, try that, right? The other one's fine, you just kind of look at them and smile and come back. And the other one, you just make sure they have it, you know, it's kind of hard to tip over on training wheels. So you're gonna spend the time with that, but that cognitive wobble is that idea of that we're wobbling, we're trying, we're learning, and there's a eureka moment. How many of you remember when you learned to ride your bike, or when your kid learned to ride their bike? Okay? That's a great eureka moment. But that's because they struggled through it. I have one, algebra, 7th grade, probably was pre-algebra class, 7th grade. But I could solve for X. I could do the math, I could do the work, I turned in my homework, I did it all. I was at home, I remember where I was sitting, I was tipping back in my chair, I remember every detail of it. When I finally actually understood what in the world I was doing, and that X actually stood for a number, and like it all of a sudden totally made sense to me. And I go out, we lived with my grandparents, I go out into the living room like, oh my word, you know, share the news. And they're all looking at me like, okay. They were not as excited as I had hoped, but I still to this day remember the whole idea. And it changed what I thought about myself as a math student. And I took math all the way through high school and into college. I think a lot of it was because of I knew I could do this all the way back in 7th grade. So that is a powerful piece of creating those moments for our students and our kids. Okay, let me just look real quick. I think just in general, last little comment is he mentioned it in the video. Just remember that different students, even in the same thing, different kids are going to work through this at different paces and in different ways, and that is totally okay. And that is not that everyone's going to get there the same. I want to go back over the 4 stages of learning, and as we do that, kind of look at this side in particular with the academic language, and as we talk about it, think about where they fit in this. So there's 4 stages of the learning pit. Concept, he talked about that. The learning challenge begins with the concept. It can come from media, conversation, observation, the curriculum. As long as there is some understanding of the concepts you wish to explore, then the learning challenge can work. Okay, so that's just making sure that we've got what we want. Our students are prepared for that. The conflict is number 2. The key to the learning challenge is to get into the pit by creating cognitive conflict in their minds. This deliberate creation of a dilemma is what makes the learning challenge such a good model for challenge, inquiry, and reasoning. So examples was the tourist, what makes the capital, odd, and even. I found the odd and even answer to be incredibly powerful because that you could see when they talked about the cakes, they did not completely understand it, and odd and even is a foundation. That foundation was about fractions, and fractions like rule math. If you can't do fractions, then you're just going to struggle for so long with math. So it is really great that he asked those questions, and even though the kids were like, I need to apologize to my teacher, like, yeah, we'd cut it in half. And the teachers were, but to me that as a teacher, I'd be like, oh, I'd expose something I didn't do as a teacher to lay a foundation. And they got to the place of the odd socks, and now that's something that makes sense and that they can hold on to. So I think it's worth it even for us to learn and see, does my child truly understand this, and let me not be afraid to ask those questions to make sure that they really understand it, because so many things are foundational for what comes next. So those are some great examples. The stealing, the Robin Hood, and it's wrong to steal. I mean, those are some really great things for a hero is someone who takes risk on the behalf of others, but then so do terrorists. Great high school conversation. So this can be for anything, right? And any grade, any age. These are really important conversations for us to understand our definitions and to wrestle with those things. Let's see. Here. Our role during this is to facilitate the process so mistakes and struggle are seen as opportunities for clarity. Creating an atmosphere where it's okay to risk that, and not if it's like someone, you say something, I'm like, well, what about this? That there's not this, that you now feel shut down. That is taking time for you at home and students in a classroom, a teacher creating an environment where it is safe to do that, and setting a lot of expectations so that we can have that dialogue back and forth, and it's not you're right or wrong, it is this exploration of learning and understanding. What about? Tell me more is one of my favorite phrases. With people, my children are 21 and 23, and my role often is just to say now, tell me more, as opposed to helping them. But it is great because I get all kinds of information, but it works in the classroom really, really well. Tell me more about odd or even. Tell me more about tourism so that you can get a little bit deeper. So that is our role, is to facilitate and then direct. Let me go to the next one. Construct. So now when we're here, this is where we're going to support and encourage. So like, go do some research. Here's some resources. Even after they've been through this cycle a few times, what has helped you in the past when you've been in the pit? So in the construct, after a while, students will begin to make links and construct meaning. They will do this by examining options, connecting ideas, explaining cause and effect. Often but not always, this leads them to a sense of eureka in which they find new clarity. This sense of revelation is one of the reasons the effort of going through the pit is so worthwhile. I've heard lots of kids on video be interviewed that have been in schools where they do this, and they talk about this idea of, I've been in the pit, I understand why I'm in there, I'm fine being in there, and explaining why it's been valuable for them. So it is eventually, once they get there and see that, then they can tell you why it's valuable. Our role in that is to have resources, information, ask thoughtful questions, and really all you as the moms, we have all moms in here today, you know your student, your children really, really well, and there's a line with every kid that you've crossed over sometimes and now they're in a puddle on the floor. So, or they're frustrated or whatever, and that is something that you know well, and you want to work on building that trust so that they are able to communicate to you like, okay, I'm getting frustrated now, or you can sense that and be able to back off, like, what do you need? What have you used before? You know, remember, this is about learning. This isn't about getting it right or wrong. And so there's a lot of that you are going to be an expert in, whereas in a classroom, I may not realize that that's happened until there's some little, tears coming down or someone gets upset. And then I can come back around and learn a little bit more about that student in a classroom setting. So that is part of our role in there as well. And then the fourth is consider, after achieving this sense of eureka, your students should reflect on their learning journey. They can do this by considering how they progress from the simplistic ideas of stage 1 to identifying more complex and conflicting ideas through to deeper understanding. And then now at stage 4, they can think about the best way to relate and apply their new understanding to different contexts. 4 is super easy, especially at home when you're pressed and we've got all these things we need to do and get to wherever, to skip. But super important that they take the time with some help to think back, because you're gonna want to be able to say, we've been in this before, and what have you used before, what have you done before, and you want them to spend time up here on the top. It's apply and relate up here, because you want them to spend that time to make those connections. So for example, for me, I like to do some crafty type things. I had a grandmother, and sewing, crocheting, I never learned to knit. And so I've always wanted to, because there's all kinds of really cool things you can do when you can knit. And I found it incredibly frustrating to hold these needles and want to be doing like crochet I can do almost without looking at it. And it was so frustrating. But I am, whatever age I am, and I have lots of experience with life and know that I can get past this. But there was a dialogue going on in my head that I'm pretty sure isn't probably all that far different from all of our kids when they're learning something hard that's going on in their head. I just have more experience, and if we can give them this visual and we can have some reference for them to go back to, like, hey, you've been in the learning pit before. What happened? Did you get out? Are you still, you weren't stuck in there forever, right? You can have a conversation with your student that helps them have a conversation in their head that's going to help them get out of that pit easier. Because, and you sharing your own experiences, them seeing you try new things. Both my girls were like, oh, you're going to learn how to knit? Yep, I'm going to learn how to knit. It's good for our kids to see us continuing to learn new things and to share what's going on in our heads. That metacognitive piece that he was talking about, it's really good for them to see us struggle with things and to have those open conversations, because I think often nowadays our kids think that it needs to be easy, and that I can't admit that I don't know something, and it's good for us to lead by example in that area as well.